Was it for nothing? Did I get it all wrong? I have never known a human being who, if they are honest with themselves, in any vocation, as a priest or religious, as a student or seminarian, as a married person or single, who does not at some point along the way hit the wall and ask that question. Was it all for nothing? Did I waste my life? I have so little to show for it. There is this desert now where I used to feel something. I don't know. I hear that question asked again and again around the endings of things. When one or the other decides it's time for the divorce, when a dating relationship skids off the rails and one of them decides to end it. I hear that question asked in hospital rooms after a long illness or at the very end, and over a couple of beers at the end of a day or at the end of a vocation. I hear it asked when the university of your dreams sends you the Dear John that you were not accepted, or when you give your whole life to a career or a cause that you really believed in and feel passionate about, and then you get voted out, or you just get very hurt by something or another, or you lose. I hear it from parents whose kids go off those rails too sometimes, and who blame themselves again and again for what went wrong. Sometimes it comes up in us when we're just quiet enough to listen to those voices inside of us that are voices of self-doubt. Into these moments that very few escape comes this story of John the Baptist, the one Jesus called the last and the greatest of the prophets of Israel. This last and greatest is a man who's depressed. He spent his adult life giving up many things for what he believed in. He gave up the luxurious garments and the coiffed hair and the fine food because he believed in something. He believed that if people would turn their lives around, the world would be saved from itself. If people turn their lives around, the world would be saved from itself. A fair thought, I'd say. And so he gave up a lot of what most people have to help people do just that, to turn their life around. He preached it in season and out. And he became someone who points to something else, to someone else. This John was a tough cookie, this wild man. John was uncompromising. And when people came to Jesus complaining about John, John's too tough on them, Jesus challenged them. What did you expect? What did you go out there to see? Someone who panders to a crowd? Another pleaser? What did you go out there to see? Some pretty boy? Some hunk of burning love? Those people are in Hollywood and GQ magazines. They're not in the desert. You went to a desert. Did you forget that? Remember? Why? Why did you go out there to see him there? Because you wanted to see a prophet. You got what you were looking for, and now you're complaining. Now you're turning on him. You got your prophet. And indeed, prophet he was. All the way to the end. He fearlessly condemned evil wherever and whenever he encountered it, even to the powerful. He called Herod out on an adulterous relationship. And as a consequence, he's now languishing in a prison. He knows there's a great chance he will never get out of this prison. He will never get out of this rock-walled, damp, moldy, rat-infested prison. And so he has a lot of time to think, John does. The last and greatest prophet, shackled in a tiny prison, his eyes hollowed, dulled by despair, his pupils as big as the moon, trying desperately to gobble in as much light as they possibly could in this darkness. And he is depressed. He has nothing to show for his life. His success was short-lived. And to make matters worse, the stories he was hearing of this Jesus he spent his life pointing to were unsettling to him. He was hearing stories of Jesus that weren't the Messiah he imagined. And so he asked someone who came to see him, "Would you do me something for me?" He said to him. "Would you go to Jesus and would you ask him if he's the one?" What essentially John was saying was, "I thought you were he. But the way you live and talk is so much more about happiness and joy and dancing, and you're not severe enough, and you're not condemning enough. You're not doing it the way I always understood it should be done. Shouldn't you be tougher on people? Shouldn't you be tougher on sin? Did I get it wrong? Did I get it all wrong? Did I waste my whole life? I don't know you anymore. I don't know me anymore." Jesus hit that same wall when it was all closing in on him. His agony in the garden was so full of that same darkness as was John's. Many of you grew up, as I did, with the musical Jesus Christ Superstar ringing through our brains over and over again. But I have to say, some of the lyrics of that rock opera captured Jesus' heart that night of the agony so powerfully. When that writer wrote of Jesus, putting these words in the mouth of Jesus the night before he died, "I've changed. I'm not as sure as when I started. Then I was inspired. Now I'm sad and tired. Listen, surely I've exceeded expectations. I've tried for 3 years. Seems like 30. Could you ask as much from any other man?" Many is the night in the seminary, and times in the priesthood since, when those words were mine. And I could taste the salt of my tears. And there were times in chapel in the seminary when I would position myself across from this beautiful, beautiful stained glass window. There was a picture of John bent over in his prison cell with his hand on his head, as if to say, "Did I get it wrong?" St. Teresa of Calcutta suffered the dark night of her soul. She got no comfort. She was taxed to the max. She was picking up dead and dying bodies from the streets of Calcutta who were ignored by all. And she also wondered, "I thought it was God calling me to do this, but maybe I was wrong. I've done it as faithfully as I know how, but but I don't even know if it was real anymore. Any leader, any woman or man who's ever tried to lead knows those moments, even leading your family. Martin Luther King writes of it from prison. Gandhi did. Mandela did, even as he watched his marriage and his family disintegrate from his prison cell. Francis, I suspect, knew it. And I mean the saint, and I mean the Pope. Depression, perhaps, but really in the end, never outright despair. When the jail gate opened and John's executioner entered with just an axe and a fancy silver platter, John got up and went to him. And when they came for Jesus in the garden that night, he rose and went to them and delivered himself to his betrayer. And Mother Teresa died, picking up the dead and the dying from the streets till her last breath, even though they wondered, did I get it wrong? You see, they all felt like giving up. They all felt sometimes like giving up. But they didn't. They didn't give up. They wondered if it all went wrong and whether or not they had wasted their life. But they finished what they started, and they had managed to finish even in the midst of all of those self-doubts along the way. We all get there sometime if we live long enough. There will come a time in all of our lives, and the lives of all those we love, as a matter of fact, when they will wonder the same thing. Was it all for nothing? Did we get it all wrong? Let our depressions never cause us to despair. We dare not despair. Rather, we need, like John, to send out our messengers, send out someone, maybe a friend or relative, someone who can look back at our lives for us when we can't look back at our own lives from up here, someone who will look back at our lives and said, no, you didn't waste it. I knew you. I remembered the passion I saw in your eyes. I remember the fire in your belly. I know why you married her. I know why you married him. I know why you became a priest or a sister. I know why you went for that degree. I was with you, and it was real. Sometimes somebody has to come back and tell us that, because we can't see it ourselves right now. Just like John did from prison when he sent out his scouts to look back at him. Let them remind you of how you felt along the way, and you found something at one point worth your life. And you found something worth getting up for in the morning. You found some cause you wanted to throw your heart at, and you felt it in your bones. And how you became a better person from it along the way, even though you don't feel like that better person right now. They saw what it was like to live with such an intensity and ferociousness and desire. They knew you when you found something to do with your one wild and beautiful life. And even, my friends, even if the dream we started with never is realized the way we dreamt it, you will see what I trust John saw. When they came back to him and said to him, He never really answered your question, John. He never really said whether or not he was the one. But John, as we stood there, we saw him helping people. We saw people who were blind see again. We all saw people who were lame, who couldn't walk, start to run again. Helping people who could not hear to dance to the sounds of music they never ever heard before. And as they left John back in that cell to himself, I can just see that stinking failure of a prophet, caged now, sitting back with those arms and legs shackled. Just hours before that executioner came in with that axe. And smiling.